The logistics industry is a key cog in the global economy, moving goods tens of thousands of miles from producers to consumers across oceans, through port terminals, and across railroad lines and highways. While the logistics industry makes it possible for global corporations to create immense wealth, satisfy myriad consumer demands, and earn hundreds of billions of dollars of profit, the workers of the logistics industry include men and women at sea 6 months at a time, longshoremen who work amidst the filthy exhausts of the ship's diesel engines, truckers who can't afford to maintain their trucks properly. Globally traded products move through the choked neighborhoods surrounding seaports as well as inland ports, filled with railroad yards and distribution centers, filled with the diesel emissions from the train engines and drayage trucks and over-the-road trucks. The growth of this far-flung logistics industry, connecting producers in the poorest countries with consumers in the richest countries, bears the imprint of neoliberal globalization, which means unregulated labor markets and mostly toothless environmental agencies, which fail to protect labor standards in the workplace and environmental standards for air, water, and soil quality. The Industrial Revolution began without regulation or protection for either workers or the public. From the 1820s to the 1880s, men worked and often died in dangerous mines and steel mills. Immigration was encouraged to support industrialization. Women worked 12-hour days in dark and dirty sweatshops. Cutthroat competition put children to work in garment shops and textile mills, where young girls' hair could catch in the machinery, causing terrible injuries. Companies hired gang leaders and padrones to recruit children and immigrants. Children worked all day long at the mining tipple, separating slate from the coal as it poured from the mine. Union efforts to improve conditions were often thwarted by employers and the courts. During the last quarter of the 19th century, growing public revulsion finally led to change. The voice of a social gospel began to be heard. Ministers working on overseas missions returned home to form the Church of the Carpenter in Boston, the Presbyterian Labor Temple in New York. Walter Rauschenbusch wrote social theology from the midst of the notorious Hell's Kitchen district of New York. In Chicago, Jane Addams founded Hull House, and social settlements grew in the cities to give hope to working-class people. A new social consciousness and political consensus developed. Congress passed the Interstate Commerce Act in 1887. State legislators passed laws creating regulatory agencies that limited child labor, protected women from excessive hours of toil, and established health standards for tenements and workplaces. During this progressive era, presidents such as William Howard Taft, Woodrow Wilson, and Theodore Roosevelt broke up or regulated monopolies. They established a Federal Reserve System to manage the banks and currency, and created the Food and Drug Administration to establish health standards for food. During the Great Depression, pressure from unemployed workers and would-be unionists emboldened Franklin Roosevelt's administration to create the regulatory apparatus necessary to manage capitalism in the public interest. Historian David Kennedy noted that Roosevelt's cabinet was filled with men and women who had cut their eye teeth working in inner-city settlements and social ministries. As unions gained collective bargaining power and New Deal agencies regulated competition in labor and product markets, coal mining, steel making, and automaking became well-paying work with retirement and health benefits. A new burst of reform energy in the 1960s paved the way for federal regulation of the environment and the workplace. The Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, and Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1971 were three of the fruits of this reform effort, and established federal authority to force corporations to take the public interest in a healthful environment into account when managers made decisions about production methods and work processes. This reform trajectory reversed abruptly in the 1970s after the pain imposed by stagflation undermined public confidence that the government could effectively manage capitalism in the public interest. Corporate America blamed excessive regulation for slow growth and rapid inflation and lobbied for deregulation. Under President Carter, Congress deregulated air transport and trucking. As neoliberalism gained momentum under President Reagan in the 1980s, telecommunications deregulation was followed by loosening of banking and securities controls. Federal agencies charged with regulating corporate behavior began to lose authority and resources. Deregulation was only one part of this neoliberal agenda. Tax cuts, privatization, and global trade and investment were equally important. Neoliberal globalization spurred new industries in the Silicon Valley and Bangalore, creating unimagined wealth, but it also stimulated offshoring of production, deprived city and state government of necessary revenues, bred a global network of sweatshops, and generated an unsustainable American trade deficit. It pushed hundreds of millions of subsistence farmers off the land and into global slums. We can see the fruits of neoliberal globalization in the degraded labor markets of the ports and warehouse districts of the Northeast and its cities. Seafarers on the massive container ships that bring Chinese manufactured goods to American consumers toil at sea 6 months at a time. Port truckers earn $7 an hour. Longshoremen face increasingly irregular and unsteady work. Warehouse employers often use temporary contracts without benefits or the protection of labor law. The pollution caused by a rapidly growing, almost entirely deregulated import economy imperils everyone's health and safety throughout the Northeast. In New Jersey, 13 counties along the major freight distribution rates are out of compliance with federal air quality standards. As a result, asthma keeps children out of school. 1 of every 4 children in our urban communities suffer from asthma. The health impact of diesel pollution costs the state of New Jersey $5 billion annually. It costs the state of California more than $20 billion. So the cutting edge of justice is all around us. On the West Coast, interfaith groups have joined with environmentalists, unions, mayors, and legislators to seek fundamental improvements. Here is the story of that half-finished struggle.
Mi nombre es Narciso Román. Son mis hijos. Aquí es donde estamos, a donde vivimos nosotros. Hasta donde me alcanza. Ahora me alcanza a pagar lo que gano supuestamente como owner operator. Con ese sueldo tengo que pagar $1,000 de renta, pagar biles y pagar doctor. Yo tengo un hijo que es asmático.
My dad had to take me to the hospital in emergency, and the doctors asked himself that why is this man still alive when I should be dead.
Ya vieron cuál es mi hogar. No vivo en una forma que se diga que soy dueño de negocio. Vivo como esclavo de las compañías. Por eso siempre estamos clamando justicia, dignidad para nosotros y nuestras familias.
If there was a list ranking the greatest problems facing humanity in the 21st century, global warming and poverty would be at the top of that list. And the idea that we can attack both of these problems together is incredibly exciting. And what better place to start than Los Angeles?
Well, for years, the environmental and labor movement have worked under the false assumption that either we could have good jobs or we could have a clean environment. But actually, we need to be able to have both.
Ironically, the perils of global warming, the economic dislocations of globalization have presented an unprecedented opportunity for us to chart a new path of cooperation between the environmental and labor movements.
The twin ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach are the largest air polluter in Southern California. Together, they pollute more than 500,000 cars. The trucks from the ports alone are 30, maybe 40% of the air pollution risk in Southern California.
Diesel exhaust is making people die. In this air basin, it happens every day. Real people do in fact die from cancer, heart attacks, strokes, asthma.
You would think that California is already environmentally conscious until you see the port. And you see what's happening with asthma. You see what's happening with these engines that are literally just kind of chilling out by schools or by neighborhoods.
If you look at the children here in Long Beach who have ever been diagnosed with asthma, we're looking at about a 19% rate. There's a huge jump for those communities that are located directly next to these pollution sources.
It's the port in a whole that creates this big problem as far as pollution and smog. So, not only do I have to work in it, but then I have to go home and live in it.
I see drivers on the side pull over, vomiting or throwing out for the reason. And I stop because I know what they're going through. It's not because they're sick. I know that being around here, it gets you sick.
The environmental and health impacts of the Port of Los Angeles are directly linked to job quality for the 16,000 port truck drivers that work there. In the 1980s, trucking was deregulated, and these drivers were misclassified as independent contractors.
As an owner-operator, we just have to do whatever we had to do. The companies are not responsible, not even for workers' compensation. We had to pay that when we pay our taxes.
The current port trucking system has been broken for at least 20 years, and it's poor immigrant communities and drivers who are bearing the brunt of the burden created by this system, while it's the Walmarts and other big corporations that are reaping all the rewards.
45% of the nation's goods come through these ports. We are now part of a global economy, whether we like it or not.
If truck drivers stopped working one day, America would stop working.
The entire port industry depends on them, yet they are not recognized either in wages or any type of benefit, even though their job is so crucial and also so dangerous.
Starting in Southern California, we've launched an ambitious campaign to bring the American dream to 88,000 truck drivers across the country, and at the same time, attaining the most significant diesel emission reductions in our nation's history.
The Clean Trucks program will set strict labor standards and environmental standards to make sure that drivers are fairly compensated and the trucks that they're driving are running on clean fuel. The program will also allow the ports of LA and Long Beach to expand and build the regional economy, but they can only do that if they meet their goals for reducing pollution.
We are urging the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach to act out on the Clean Air Action Plan. We need this done now.
Aún es tu tiempo y no es momento de calma. Enfrenta la injusticia, la mentira, el asesino.
It's been incredibly exciting to see groups that have either never worked with each other or had been at odds with each other come together into such a powerful force.
And I want to tell you, I will not be moved. I will not be moved. I am supporting you. I will not budge until this system has been fixed and every one of you becomes an employee.
It's up to all of us. Es una responsabilidad de todos nosotros.
Improving driver pay will result in tens of millions of dollars being poured into low-income neighborhoods. And taxpayers will save billions of dollars now spent on health care for uninsured drivers and the medical problems caused by dirty trucks.
Imagine taking an entire class of workers in one of the nation's largest industries and moving them into the middle class overnight. That's what the Clean Trucks program will do.
Hay una actitud de calma mientras mi cuerpo arde. La indiferencia puede costarte la vida.
It's labor and environmental groups coming together to lift more than 16,000 drivers out of poverty and create healthy communities for us and for our kids.
When we win, and we will win, this is going to be one of the biggest things that's happened to clean up the shipping industry anywhere in the world. This is very, very important.
We're building something here that will go way beyond just the Port Truck Driver campaign. It's bringing together two of the most important movements in this country, in fact in the world, and it's going to make the world a better place for everyone.